Like I say, customize these bags. They got the basic stuff, however you feel or whatever you think you might need. No machetes, long knives, pipe bombs, things like that, please. But a roll of duct tape is always a good thing. A small first aid kit if you would like. If you're CPR certified, one of those little pocket masks, put it in there. Just whatever you think would help make your job easier in the event you get stuck having to help yourself and a whole bunch of other people. Today we're going to talk about light search and rescue operations. This is when you guys actually may have to, in a disaster, go in somewhere and extract somebody and search for somebody inside a structure. Or it could be that you may have to go or get called upon to go assist looking for somebody, say like it's lost. I mean, I could think of one example right now. Say you have a small child in Emerald Park, right back here behind the campus, gets loose from parents, they can't find them. You know, if there's a large-scale effort to try to find a small child, they may call upon you guys as trained volunteers and see if you'd be willing to help. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies of that, how that all works. And Stuart's going to do a lot of this today, and then I'm going to do a lot of this. And we're going to kind of switch off. So when you start looking at this, 3 separate operations are going in here at once. The size up that we go through, or that we've talked about so much, this 9-step process is where this is really, really going to hit home. We talked about it in disaster med ops, but this is where it's really going to be important for your safety to go through that continuous process. Also, locating the victims and documenting things. Again, one of the biggest things we do is we document what we see. And then actually extracting victims. When you decide to attempt a rescue, you need to think about these 3 factors. The risks involved for you, which your safety is the most important. The greatest good for the greatest number. What is the best thing to do for everybody concerned? If 5 people are trying to go in to rescue 1 person in a very, very, very dangerous environment, are we doing ourselves any favors? Losing 5 to save 1. So we have to think about that. And then, do we have the resources and the manpower available to pull this off? Yes, we may have 5 people that can carry this person out. However, we may not have the equipment to facilitate an extraction. We may not have the cribbing equipment. We'll talk about cribbing and things like that here in just a little bit. So, the goals for search and rescue. Rescue the greatest number in the shortest amount of time. If the safety factor is good, we are reasonably safe in undertaking this, we can probably save a lot of people in a short amount of time. Next, get the walking wounded out first. We talked a little bit about that in triage, and we will reiterate that a little bit. And then next, the lightly trapped victims next. The people that may just be minor stuck in a jam, maybe a door's jammed shut, something that may be easily able to get them out. And then finally, keeping the rescuer safe in that continuous 9-step process of evaluating and reevaluating what's going on. It's going to depend on your size up, your safety, and the victim's safety. In order for this to be effective, you have to be able to walk up on this scene and look at it and size it up and see the hazards that you may face. We don't want to get that tunnel vision of we know our friend or we know our coworker or we know our family members in this particular structure and zone in on getting them out no matter what, whenever going in there and moving something around and starting to pull debris out of the way may compromise you and them both. It may mean that we have to stop, think about it, wait on that trench rescue team from the fire department to get there who has that capability. So, the objectives for this particular unit: identify the size up requirements, describe the most common search techniques. There's different ways of doing different searches. Using safe techniques for debris removal. We don't want to just start going into a particular structure and picking things up and throwing pieces of wall and material around. We don't know what that may be holding up. So there's a method to the madness there. And then using safe techniques for a victim's extraction. We're going to talk about lifts, we're going to talk about moves, and then we're going to talk about ways to protect yourself during these rescue operations. Safety during the search and rescue operations, conducting interior and exterior searches, inside buildings and outside, and then actually conducting the rescue operations themselves. We've seen this on just about every section that we've went over thus far to date. This is the baseline for everything we do before we undertake anything. Gathering the facts, assessing the damage, considering the probabilities, assessing your situation, the priorities, the decision making, so on. So, step one in this 9-step process. Gather the facts. Time of event and the day of the week. The construction and the type of terrain. Can these two have a factor in how you handle a certain thing? The time of the day. If it's pitch black dark, are you going to have a hard time really seeing what you may need to see? If it's raining and it's wet, that may have a factor. The type of construction or the terrain that you're working in. If you're searching for a lost person on Pinnacle Mountain in July, what could you face as far as safety goes? Heat exhaustion, dehydration. Those are things that you have to think about in your size up and your long-term thinking, okay, or how do we undertake this? And we have to plan and compensate for those things. Occupancy. If you've got a large structure that's been damaged, it's got to be evacuated, and people have to come out. Think about the amount of people that are in that building, or guess at how many people. If something happens and there's an event at Verizon Arena and something bad happens, that first incident commander that gets on the scene for North Little Rock Fire Department is going to be in overdrive mode trying to figure out how many people are in that structure. Because you documenting all of this, you're going to be the first one that they make contact with many times, the professional responders. Well, as soon as that police officer or that firefighter walks up and you say, we've got approximately 50 to 60 people in this building, they're going to get on the radio and start calling for more help, more resources, all of that. We talk about the weather. If it's rainy, it's nasty. If lightning is real bad and you're still in the middle of an active, severe thunderstorm, would we want to try to undertake some type of rescue extraction in a trench or a ditch with the water flow? No. We want to stay away from that. And any other hazards?
Hey, I wanted to say something real quick also about the time of day that it is. You can also think about, what if a tornado goes through a neighborhood? If it goes through at night, most people are at home at their houses at night. Or if it happens during the day, most people are gone and at work. So that's something to think about when it goes through and you start going through these buildings to look for survivors on how many people are probably in the area based on what time of day it is. That's pretty much all I want.
And that's a good point. You guys remember the tornadoes at Bologna and Mayflower a couple of years ago? When did that tornado occur? At night. Okay? Now, when you see a town that looks like a bomb has hit it, the streets don't look the same, the scenery doesn't look the same. The place you live or the place that you've driven through every day in the dark and completely destroyed, you will not recognize or even know that you're on a particular street that you knew very well. You will become disoriented.
I know that for a fact. I'm from Bologna, and I helped work the rescues for the Bologna, this past Bologna tornado. The town didn't even look like nothing. I would be on the streets that I used to go down all the time as a kid, and I didn't even know I was on that street because everything in that area was gone.
And Friday I've got a lot of photos. She knows that I'm a lieutenant in the Civil Air Patrol, and one of the things that we do is we are the auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force, and our job in Arkansas is disaster relief and search and rescue. That's what we do for the Air Force. And when those tornadoes occurred, they immediately put us on alert, and we started flying sorties, taking photos of the damage from the air. And I've got those photos. We spent 5 days flying, so you'll see the weather starting on the first day is really ugly from the air, and then it gets better, and then you see just the devastation. And some of you that know Mayflower and Bologna very well, you won't recognize where things were. I mean, you'll see the interstate at Bologna, at Mayflower, but you won't know what's what because of all the widespread damage. So that's one of the things that you have to think about. Assess and communicate the damage. When you're actually going in and you see a wall that has a large crack in it, stop and look at it. Is it a small crack? Is it a large crack? Is it a crack that is crumbling? Is it a load-bearing wall? Does it look like it's got a pillar holding the roof up? And communicate that to your partners. Point it out and show it to them. They may know more about construction than you do. And they may know that, hey, we've got to back off this. That's very unstable. So assess it and communicate it. Is the damage light, moderate, or heavy? Light damage, right here, superficial stuff, broken windows, light cracks in sheetrock, things like that. All this stuff is light damage. I mean, it's going to kind of blow some stuff around, but all in all, the main four walls were intact, we're good. Roof's not blown off. Moderate damage. Obvious visible signs of damage. You're also looking at a lot of the decorative work around porches, things like that. It's all busted. You'll see major damage to the interior contents, your load-bearing walls. This is whenever it's jerked the cabinets down out of the kitchen. You're looking at the building still on its original foundation. It's not been shifted off its foundation. This particular type of damage is, when you see this, you only want to make entry on that structure to save a life. If there's nobody in there, or if you have reason to believe that there's nobody in there, don't even attempt going in there. Let a rescue team go in that's got the equipment to handle that kind of stuff. Heavy damage. Whenever you've got a partial or total collapse of a structure, it has shifted completely off its foundation. Obvious structural instability. One thing that you have to worry about whenever you're looking at something like this, it's ripped gas lines up, it's ripped electrical lines up. There may be a lot of stuff that's opened up since this thing has been shaken up that you don't want to touch, you don't want to go near. As a CERT member, you never, ever, ever want to try to take, even if you know somebody's in there, we're not qualified or capable of handling that. You probably wouldn't see police officers running into that because we know where the boundary line is for our safety. Now, we'll push that envelope a lot of times, but if we know pretty certain that we start going in there and picking up stuff and throwing stuff around and the whole thing comes down on all of us, again, we're not doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people either.
This kind of also goes back to the not doing more than what you're trained to do. We are not, as a CERT team, you are not trained to enter buildings like this. You could go in there and accidentally hit something that'll knock the entire structure off, and next thing you know, the building collapses on top of you. That's one of those things, one of those reasons why we don't do anything more than what we are trained to do.
And then instead of one victim, we got two. Okay, step 3, the size up. Considering the probabilities. How stable is the situation as a whole? What else can go wrong? Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will. What else can go wrong? When you're thinking about this, you kind of have to use your negative side of life and go, this is bad. If we do this, what else is going to go bad while we're doing this? And then you start rationalizing all this bad stuff, and then you start thinking, you know what? This ain't worth getting killed over. Or the worst that can happen is we're going to get dirty. But that's worth it. Let's go. And what does it mean for the search and rescue? It may mean that, yes, you know somebody is in this structure, you know someone is critically injured in this structure, and you know they need vital help. And you know that your decision may mean that someone may not make it. And you consider that, but you have to know your limits. And you can't let yourself get down over that. You know what this rescue, you know what it means if you don't perform this rescue. But you also know what happens if you do try. So you have to consider those possibilities. So assessing your situation continuously as you're going along, you are assessing, is it safe for us to proceed? You make it through the first section of this structure or the first floor of this structure, and now you want to go upstairs. You're assessing. Is it safe to go upstairs? You start up the stairs, you see something, and you've assessed it, you've communicated it, and you realize that, you know what, it's not safe anymore. Time to back off of it. You think about what risks will you face. If you're going into a structure that has moderate damage, and it's still on the foundation, but it has been rocked a little bit, you may be facing some broken glass you don't want to step in. You may be dealing with Lord forbid, you walk in somewhere and they're manufacturing a substance of some sort. It's been known to happen. And you walk in on somebody's homemade chemistry lab, you know. But you think about it. It can happen.
Just because the building's safe in a situation like that doesn't mean it's still safe.
The contents are not safe.
Yeah. The structure's safe. Those things in there make it very unsafe for you.
You have to think about what resources are going to be needed. When you guys get there and you obviously see something large scale, say it's a nursing home in your community and a tornado has happened. And you see the roof is obviously partially gone. You got moderate structural damage because the 4 walls are still standing, but there's damage. What kind of major resources do you know you're going to need? You're going to need ambulances. Because most of the time, people in nursing homes are confined. They're bedridden. The only way to transport them is generally by ambulance. So you know you're going to need lots of ambulances in a pretty large, decent-sized nursing home. You also know for the ones that are there, the workers that are going to be there, you're going to need logistical support, food. You're going to need fresh water. Obviously, a lot of these people in nursing homes, they're on lots of medications. There's no telling where these medications have ended up and where they've been blown. So hospitals need to be aware of what they're facing. So all of these things are in your size up when you're looking at it. You go, we're going to need ambulances, we're going to need water, we're going to need this. And so whenever the first responding agencies get there, or when whoever makes that call saying this is what you are facing, you call that dispatcher and say this is what's going on down here. you may need to let them know they're going to need a lot of ambulances to transport people. And that gets the ball rolling.
Another thing to think of, like in a situation like that, like the scenario you pointed out of a nursing home, and you got to think about the people that are inside the structure, like a nursing home. They're older, they've got medical issues already. Is it safe to move them? A lot of these people, they're already bone structures really frail. What injuries have they occurred because of this? Is it safe to move them out of the structure, or is it safe to move them in general? So that's also things you need to think of when you're going into the situation.
And then you have to think, okay, we know what resources we're going to need. What do we have available? What's immediately available at our disposal? It may mean that you have 3 ambulances for the entire county. Some of these small counties, that may be all you've got. And they have to set them up and start rationing what they have on those ambulances for the most critical people until help gets there. So you have to look at what you're going to need and what you have. And you use what you have as best you can until you get what you need. So, professional rescue resources personnel, firefighters, police, nurses, MDs, contractors. Believe it or not, some of these construction companies, they're pretty good at coming in an emergency. Seen a trench rescue one time where a guy got buried down in a trench, pipeline trench. They actually, guy was good enough with a backhoe. He run that backhoe down there in very small, easy going deal in moving dirt. And that saved 20 people down there with shovels trying to dig him out whenever that earth mover, he could get in there and very lightly get close enough without injuring the guy because they knew where he went in. So contractors, if you run into a situation like that, City of Morrilton, Arkansas had a major fire several years ago in an uptown structure. One of the city firefighters, I was there, I worked it. One of the city firefighters owned an excavation company, brought a track hoe in, put the boom up on the side of the wall to support a 5-story wall to keep it off the firefighters during the firefighting operations. Eventually the wall came down, but that bought time to get everything set up, cleared away, and then it went down. So contractors can be your best friend. They really can if they're donating their time and their effort. Nurses and MDs, guys, in a large scale incident, the VA has all kinds of mobile ER trailers. And they train with them. Their doctors, their nurses, their personnel will come and set up a field hospital if they need to, and it's bad enough. So those resources are there. And of course, police and cops are everywhere. Tools, something you may want to think about. These are things that most of us, husbands, some wives run chainsaws too. Y'all probably got a crowbar, a car jack. It may mean that the difference in freeing somebody out of a situation, if their laser pin is, all it takes is a car jack to come out of your car to lift them up, lift that up. Probability of safety is pretty good. We just lift this up. Nothing else is going to come down if we do it, and then you can use that as to your advantage. And then chainsaw. Step 5, you prioritize what's happening. What should be done, the highest priority, in what order. It may mean that we have to do some cribbing, and we'll talk again later on, we're going to talk about cribbing. You may have to do some cribbing first. You may have to clear some small debris out of the way before you can actually get into the rescue operation. And how to rescue the greatest number, again, in the shortest amount of time. Now, going back to that, you see those guys in there? Would we want to try to be in there in that environment trying to undertake a search and rescue operation? What are some of the things that you look at just from that photo right there?
Everything.
Yeah, pretty much, right? But what you just did is you looked at a scene and you assessed it. You looked at it and said, there's no way. Based on these factors. We've got active power line. We don't even know if they're active or not, but their power line's down. We're going to treat them like they're hot. You know, that fire over there, yeah, we could probably put something small like that out with a fire extinguisher, but we've got to go through the power lines to do it, so we're not going to touch it. And then whatever that structure is right there, it's obviously pretty unsound. So you have, again, y'all looked at that, you assessed it, and made a decision not to try to do anything with that. So when you make that decision, keep your safety in mind. Life safety for victims and others. Your life obviously is the most important factor in undertaking this, but you want to consider the victim too. Again, we may be forced to not act for our own safety, but again, we may do something trying to get to them that could do more harm than good to them. So, protection of the environment. If for some reason you're going through undertaking a search in a structure, and again, you never know what you're going to find in a building or a house, and you pick up a 5-gallon bucket and you toss it out of the way, and whenever it lands and it opens up and it's got a chemical in it that just broke loose and now it's flowing everywhere, now we got an environmental and a hazmat problem with boot.
So that's something definitely to think about in like our situation here on campus. We've talked about it before. There's a lot of buildings that have hazardous materials in it in a lot of the classrooms. So if a disaster happened here, you're going through the rooms, you know, if you see, just because, you know, you see something that looks like a bucket of water, it might not be a bucket of water. And, you know, if it's all kinds of containers, you never know. Something came through and the tornado came through and it could have knocked all the labels off of something. Be careful.
Good point. How many work at South? One. Okay. If you're tasked with going out there, just so you know, that's where a lot of that T&I stuff is, like auto body, where automotive is. They've got a lot of chemicals in some of them various shops out there. Now, imagine and that is Tornado Alley too, up I-30. Imagine a tornado hitting that building and taking all those various chemicals and swirling them up into one big cocktail and dumping it in the building. Are we even going to attempt to do anything with that? No. We're going to call hazmat and sit back, and anybody that comes out to us, we'll try to help as best that we can. But we're not going to try to go in searching that building whenever all that happens. And then protection of property. Developing a plan of action. Focused operation on the established priorities and decisions. Once you come up with your game plan and you of the big priority, what's our big goal here? What do we got to get done first? And you've made your decision to get that done. This plan of action is going to help with your documentation. That way, when they come up to you and ask you, what are you doing? You can say, we're starting here by doing this first, and when they get done with that, they're working on this, and so on and so forth. That way, when you hand that off to the fire department or the police department or whatever, they don't have to send personnel to handle that. They already know, CERT guys got that. We can focus over here. This plan of action helps you, and it also helps the responders. And then it provides documentation for part of the CERT records. You guys are going to keep records on everything you do, from training to meetings to, Lord forbid, you get deployed for an actual incident. Reason being is, in a large-scale disaster, the city and or county actually gets paid for your time. Kind of crazy, isn't it? The federal government actually pays back the community for the volunteer hours. And so whenever you're dealing with a large-scale incident, whenever, like say, the president declares a national disaster, as much as he did at Bologna and Mayflower, all of those volunteers that came in, they set an hour rate for that. And that's what helps people get back on their feet. It helps the county replace roads. It helps them, buy fuel for the tractors. They got to push trees out of the way, but things like that. So that documentation is critical in knowing who was on scene, who checked in, who checked out, and what they did while they were there.
Does it matter what county they come from?
No. Again, since we don't self-deploy and we deploy under a professional responding agency, when you get that call and you arrive, the form that I showed you, the check-in sheet that everybody got the other day, that's the reason for that. We're going to document that you're there, and then we're going to document what you did while you were there, and then we're going to document when you left. That way we know, one, first and foremost, that yes, you came, and then you left and you were safe. And then two, it lets the county know, okay, yes, we had 15 volunteers doing this on this scene. Step 8, taking action based on your plan in step 7. And then step 9, evaluate and continue to evaluate your process. Again, at any point in time, given weather factors, structural factors, or the environmental factors around you, it can change. A good thing can go bad. Or a bad thing can go good. It may mean that you can't gain access to something, but for whatever reason, now you can. Tell you what time is it? 9:30. Specific safety considerations. Guys, this is a broken record, but they hit it home so much that your safety is the first most important thing in undertaking anything to do with CERT. Using a buddy system. We're never, ever, 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 ever going to do anything like this on our own. Ever. Now, it may mean that you're at your house by yourself, something bad happens, and you have to handle your own business on your own until you get more help there. But in that environment, you're doing what you have to do for your survivability. Always use a buddy. Whether it's you're putting out a small fire, whether you're going into a house to try to search for someone or bring somebody out, or if you're trying to undertake some form of first aid or disaster medical op. Be alert for the hazards. Again, don't get locked into that tunnel vision. Don't get so focused on one thing right here in front of you that you completely lose sight of what's going on around you. You guys remember here a while back, there was a plane crash, and one of the survivors actually got hit by a fire truck and killed. It happened a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. But one of the crash trucks ran over one of the survivors. And I guarantee you what happened is, how often does a plane crash at an airport? When that crash truck got the call, they were so jacked up, adrenaline dumped. They're screaming across the runway, looking at that big fire and that big airplane sitting out there, and wasn't looking right down in front of them. And they hit somebody. Again, don't get tunnel vision. And then rotate teams. We're human, we can only do so much. Don't work yourself to the point that you're so physically exhausted that you can't go anymore, and now you become a victim. I know for a fact, at the top of Pinnacle Mountain in July, I used this reference before. Lady got stuck up there. First responding ambulance unit gets there, they've got to go up to the 5th level of Pinnacle. That's not an easy task to undertake, especially if you're out of shape, as most ambulance crews are. Now they get halfway up and now they're overheated, they're exhausted, and they're calling for a truck for them. Okay? That truck gets there, they make it to them, they've got to stop and rest because they're almost to the point that the first crew is. It wound up finally the Rangers had to go up and get them and bring them down and meet them halfway down the mountain. So, think about that. Rotate teams. If you have to, work part of the way up, hit a certain point, say, okay, we need a relief team in here. Bring somebody in, you brief them on what's going on, what you've done and what you are doing. They should already be briefed for the most part when they get in there with you. And then you come out and you rehab for a little bit. Take you a 30-minute to an hour break, you're ready to go again. Structural voids. When you're inside a building, think about where you don't want to be. If you've got a multiple story building and you've got a partial floor collapse right here, that area right there is where you can wind up having a bad day. Because again, you get caught in one of those voids and that thing shifts and comes down, you're just as trapped. This is where you have professional trench rescue will come in with hydraulic jacks. They've got big airbags. They've got all kinds of toys, neat stuff to bypass this kind of stuff. But that's the pancake void. The lean-to void, that may be very well what you see the most. If you go into a home where, say, the front porch has fell over the front door and you're trying to gain entrance through the front door and that's the only way to get in, but it's got one of those extended front porches and you know how it breaks off right at the house? That's that void right in there. You have to be very, very, very careful. Individual voids. These are where you're going to find people. Bathtubs. Because again, when everything falls on top of that bathtub, there's a void in there. That's why they get in there. Underneath desks, inside cabinets, under and next to beds. Whenever you have people that have experienced a house fire, small children, their natural reaction for some reason is to run under a bed or crawl in a closet. Not only that, without them being exposed to firefighters in all of their equipment, small children are deathly afraid of firefighters. I mean, all of a sudden, a room filled with smoke and a man breathing like Darth Vader walks in with a whole bunch of lights. I mean, that's going to traumatize a 3-year-old to death. And so they're going to run from it. They may run from you just because they've been through a traumatic event. They're freaking out. So be mindful of that. When you're calling out for people, don't have the command voice going. Try to have the sincere voice going, especially if you know you're going to be dealing with small children or elderly folks or something like that.
You can just kind of announce that you're there as help.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these kids, speaking of children, you teach your kids not to talk to strangers. Stranger danger. You're still a stranger to that person, even though you're there to help. So just make sure you're announcing that you are there to help. You are friendly. Just emphasize that.
And I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute, because this is one of my pet peeves. He's experienced it, I've experienced it, everybody who wears this get-up has experienced it. When we're in Walmart, and the mother points at us and says, if you're not good, he's going to take you to jail.
I hate that too. That is so wrong.
What they're telling that child is in an emergency, I need to run as far away from that man as I can. I mean, it's a pet peeve of mine, and I do my best to correct them when it happens. Because the last thing in an emergency that I want is people running away from me, especially small children. But anyway, I'm on. Search markings. This is something you will be doing. Okay? It may, no matter how extensive your search is or how light your search is, this is something you will do.
Y'all ever see pictures of Katrina? And you've seen the X's on the walls? And you've wondered what those
Mayflower.
X's and numbers, this is what that is.
And we're going to teach you guys how to do this and what it all means. Okay, when you get up on a house or you get on a structure as a team, you've already been through, you've assessed it, you've made your priorities, you've made your decisions, you now know you're going to make entry on this structure and perform a search. The first thing you're going to do is walk up and put a line across the door or on the side of that structure. Whether you use orange spray paint or if you just take a long piece of duct tape and run it. You're going to make a slash across there. You're going to take a marker or paint. One of those big paint pens works really well for this. You're going to put the date and the time in, the time you're going in. And on the other side of that slash, right there, you're going to put your CERT ID. In this case, you may put PTC CERT on there. As time goes on and you get and our team builds, you may get another additional 15 members. You may be divided into two completely different 15-person teams. Then it may be PTC CERT 1 and 2. And depending on which team you're assigned to, you put that there. When you get through searching and you come out, you're going to complete that X and put another slash across there. And you're going to enter what you searched inside the building, whether just the first floor or the entire structure, whole building searched. And then in the bottom section, if there were any victims, you may just put a 0. Or if you put a 1 right down in there, the responding agencies, the fire department, the police, they're going to look at that and go, okay, they were just here. They searched the whole building and there's nobody in there. We can move on. That way we don't have to, the fire department doesn't spend another 30 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
What do you do if, like, there is a victim, but you can't do anything about it? Did you put something there saying there's somebody in there?
What you're going to do at that point is somebody is going to stay there. You're going to have a team buddy system of 2. And the best thing that you can do in that situation, if you know that there's a victim in there and you can't effect an extrication and get them out, and they're talking, let them know that you're not leaving. Call out to them. Tell them what's going on. You tell them, we don't have the equipment to get you out just yet, but it's on its way. And you let them know, and you just let them know, we're not leaving you, we're right here. And that way, they are a little bit more at ease that nobody's abandoned them. And then it may mean that the rest of the team goes ahead on, but 2 of you need to split off and stay there. Never just leave somebody like that.
What if it's a dead body?
If it is a dead body, if you find a dead body, mark it as a victim and move on, but document that the victim was not removed.
So leave.
Leave it. Because, again, we're looking for, in this environment, we're search and rescue, not search and recover. At that point, when you were dealing with deceased, that's a recovery operation, not a rescue. So, what information you want to mark? This is an example of it. Floors 1 and 2 search, stairs to floor 3 unsafe. If you start up and you assess and you realize that there's a particular area that is too dangerous for you to search, it needs to go over there so that when the fire department looks, they can say, okay, the entire structure has not been searched. We need to try to facilitate a search where they didn't go. Okay? Move to the CERT 23 was the one that did the searching. They found 2 victims. They moved them to the CERT Med operations area. It took them how long to search that? 45 minutes to cover it.
What, that L's an indication of type injury?
Huh?
Light injury? What's that L?
I don't know.
We're talking about right here?
Is that the
Yeah.
Model?
Yeah.
Living.
Two living.
Two living.
I would think.
There you go.
Two living moved them.
I don't know, that threw me off too.
It's not
Because
the-
we never did living or deceased. I'm assuming the biggest for
I
deceased.
went to Katrina to help.
There you go.
And the L means living, and we put D for deceased.
Search methodology again. Call out. You may rescue people simply by letting them know you're there and hearing your voice, and they can walk to you because they don't know where to go. Ask any victims who do respond information about the building or anybody else that may be trapped. If it's an office complex, you may ask them, who else was in here with you? Oh, well, we had 30 people in here for this meeting today. Not only that, if it looks like a doctor's office, you may need to start considering, is there oxygen, pure oxygen flowing out? Don't light a cigarette. Think about things like that. Asking questions, determining what's going on, and it also keeps the victim alert and giving them that hope that they're going to need. Victims might be in shock or confused. You're going to have to learn to kind of read between the lines a little bit. Is this person vocal and coherent? Do they know what they're talking about, or are they half talking out of their mind? If so, we may not need to rely on all the information they may be passing along to us. We may just want to kind of take it with a grain of salt and get the overall picture of what's going on with it. So here's one of the ways to search whenever you're going to undertake a floor search of a building. You can go from the bottom up to the top down if you're dealing with a multi-story. Right wall to left wall if you're dealing with a single floor. And so when you put those together, if you've got a multi-structure, you want to take each floor as a single floor, just like it was if it was a single floor building. You're going to search them all the same. So when you come in, you're just going to hug the wall and follow all the walls around. All the way up, kind of like a little maze. And whenever you come down through here and you just follow along all the walls, you have facilitated it in search of the entire floor. You're going to see whatever it is you need to see. And then stop frequently and listen. We're going to be kicking trash around. We're going to be hollering. We're going to be looking. Stop and listen to the silence a little bit. It may tell you what's about to happen.
Listen for the floors creaking. If you're on a second floor, it might seem that it's safe to go on. You get up there and all of a sudden you hear the floor, the sounds of the wood crackling and stuff. It might be getting ready to give way. You might need to get out of there. Or you stop and listen for the sounds. Maybe a survivor can't speak, can't verbally get out because of an injury. They're knocking or they're kicking something over to get your attention. Things that you need to stop and listen for. One, your safety, and for maybe the sounds of survivors.
Or it may be that you hear the sound of, say you're trying to make your way into a basement level of a structure, and you hear flowing water coming, lots of flowing water coming from somewhere. Now, it may be dry where you're standing, but you have to ask yourself, will it be in 20 minutes if I keep going down here?
Yeah, what if it's a house or a building that's built near a river or some form of body of water? Does that water seep through the ground and there's damage to the foundation of that basement? And now the water's seeping in and is going to flood real quickly?
And that's happened. That's happened where you've had a natural waterway near a residence, and when there's enough of it, the foundation give way down, just because of the moisture saturation in the ground.
In a realistic, like thing to think about, it's not a disaster, but y'all know that they're renovating the Robinson Center downtown Little Rock. When they were digging out that basement to make the area deeper, they had a problem because the water from the river was seeping into the ground and coming in and flooding their work. And so you gotta think about it, if buildings are, that's why I'm saying near rivers or any type of water, where water seeps through the ground every day. It can seep through that ground to get to the building.
How many of y'all seen old school houses with basements where the basements flood? Have to get that old pump out and start pumping the water out. Now, if you think about it, something now happens catastrophic and you're in there looking for survivors and now you've got double the amount of water coming through there. That's a safety issue. Stop frequently, listen for tapping, listen for movement. Again, it may mean that you're hearing drywall busting, you're hearing floors creaking and cracking. That building's talking to you, telling you what's happening with it. Listen for voices. It may mean that all they can do is speak with a loud whisper, and you might be close enough to hear them. But they're not always going to be screaming.
Because what if something that's on somebody's chest? They can't get
They can't scream.
breath enough to speak loudly. So
Triangulation method is going to allow you to view a location from several perspectives. If you can do a triangulation search and you can make it across all the different points where, say you've got an open area down here, say underneath you. You haven't searched down, but you've got a hole where you can see. Well, I can see through this side. Now I need to go around to this side so I can see what's over here. And so on and so forth. Keep records of the rescue victims and those who remain trapped or dead. If, in the process of your search, again, you have found somebody that you can't extricate from the building, but circumstances for your own safety have had to cause you to leave. That's whenever we would have to take a step back because we're in danger. You want to document all of this. Document the time you left, why you had to leave. And then report information to emergency service personnel. As soon as you can, if you run into a situation like that, you need to be telling somebody. An exterior search. This is whenever you may be called upon to go find someone who is lost outdoors. Set a distance between the searchers according to the visibility and the debris. It's going to be a lot more people, a lot closer together if you're going through, say, a wooded environment. If you're going through a national forest area, you're probably going to be arm's length apart. That way, nobody gets lost from one another, and you want to go in as straight a line as possible. Overlap patterns for full coverage, which means if us 5 start in a straight line going east to west, the next 5 need to start north-south, and we're going to overlap one another. Try to cover as much ground as you can. Search in as straight a line as possible, and then mark areas that have been searched. Again, orange spray paint. If you're good enough and you go through one of those whole topographical land nav courses or your former military, and you've got that map, you can get that grid and mark it up. But most of the time, whenever you undertake something like that or you've been called out to assist with that, the incident commander is going to know where he's sending you, and when you get back, he's going to mark it off the list as been searched. To set up a grid search, set a distance between the searchers according to visibility and debris. If it's a pasture, say it's an open field, 4 people can cover an acre of ground in no time. I mean, all I've got to be able to do is see the outline of the person walking in line with me, and they need to see me. And we can cover a lot of ground. Same thing. So moving in from the searching to the actual rescue. I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. Let's do about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. Oh, we're not? Okay.
Mr. Lemon's out roaming the streets.
Let's assign him a job or something while he's gone.
Lemon?
Give me some else he's gone.
He's gonna take the Pinnacle Mountain test.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that wasn't no joke. And you know, these were our friends and co-workers that did this.
Smoke a cigarette.
And you didn't want to laugh, but you had to laugh when that happened, because it's like, really, guys? You know?
She stuck on the side where you go up in the rocks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's like the difficult, not the easy peasy. They almost needed to fly and let somebody rappel down from a helicopter.
Well, and Petty G Mountain,
Yeah.
up at Petty G Mountain, and it's been
Yeah.
probably close to 10 years ago. Hang glider got stuck in a tree close to Cedar Falls. And they had to call the guard Blackhawk out, and the Blackhawk had to come in a hover and send a guardsman off the hoist to
In
get him
July,
out.
it's like that, I mean.
So, yeah, that kind of stuff's a nightmare. All right, so back to rescue operations. We talked about searching for people, but now that we've found what we're looking for, let's talk a little bit about that. When you find them, the first thing you're going to want to do is triage them. Okay? You're going to have to make a decision based on triaging them, assessing the situation. Can we get them out? Is it bad enough that we need to get them out and triage? Or can we triage them here first? And then removing the victims, and then removing debris. Maintain rescuer safety. I'm going to say it over and over and over again. Triaging lightly and moderately damaged buildings. You can actually perform that triage, get that assessment done pretty quick. That way you know what you're dealing with, and then evacuate them as quickly as possible. Remember, we don't go into heavy damaged buildings, right? Know your limitations. Know when you find this person, okay, I can't get them out. Don't try to kill yourself trying to get them free. Follow your safety procedures, and then removing debris by leveraging or cribbing. We're going to do a little bit of this during your practicals. It won't be a large scale thing, but we're going to do some of it just so you can get a basic idea of how it rolls. But proper lifting procedures: back straight, bend at the knees, keep the load close, tucked into your body. If you're picking up a person and you get stuck with the heavy end, get them up as close to you as you can, and then push up with your legs. Don't use those muscles in your back and blow your back out. When you crib something, what you're doing, this is for heavy lifting. You'll see a lot of times, if you've ever been to the scene of a serious car accident, where they are using the jaws of life on a vehicle. The first thing that the fire department does when they get there is they crib that vehicle. What they're going to do is they're going to slide a set of bags underneath that vehicle. They're going to air them up, and they're going to get that car, and they're going to start sticking 2x4s and blocks and rubber blocks and things like that under certain areas of this car, filling voids so that vehicle becomes stable. And so it won't move. Whenever they cut a part off of it, it won't fall to one way or another, and it won't compromise the victim inside. So that's what you're going to be doing if you have somebody that's pinned under some debris. You're going to find a way, if you can, lift as much as you can and try to crib that article that's on top of them so that you can get something in there to leverage and get them free. You're going to perform it in tandem. One's going to go with the other. The purpose of it is to extricate somebody that's pinned. And you can use all kinds of materials. Wood is generally the best. But again, in the perfect world, you get a nice big fat grant for CERT. You guys can buy those really nice rubber block sets just like the fire department have. They call them cribbing blocks. But you can make them out of wood. And most of the time, most of your volunteer fire departments and rescue, that's what they use is wood. But what you're doing, you see, say someone is pinned right there, they've lifted up and leveraged enough and got all that wood stacked up in there that now they can free whoever's underneath it. And you see right there. There's two types of removing them. They may just say, if you can get this off of me, I can move myself. Or you may have to start performing a lift or a drag maneuver to get them out. If they're unconscious, they're not going to be able to self-remove themselves. So when you're doing this and you're assessing it, think about which extrication method you want to use. General stability of the immediate environment. Is the entire place stable enough for us to put these cribbing blocks in, start doing some prying without everything just completely going to crud on us? Next, the number of rescuers available. Strength is in numbers. If there's two of you, it may be a little bit more difficult versus having the whole team there. Under stress, y'all seen where, 3 women can lift a car up off a body. Adrenaline gets to pumping, it can happen. So, the strength and the ability of the rescuers, again. People can do amazing things when they want to, especially when the adrenaline's going. And then the condition of the victim. It may mean that this person is suffering from a partial, full amputation down here. And it may mean that the pressure that is on top of them is what's holding the blood in the upper half of their body. And by you facilitating that lift, all that blood's gone. You may need to make that decision to hold in place and wait for a trench rescue and a paramedic to get there that can be ready for that. Again, that comes with your triage, that comes with your assessment. And you're constantly assessing what's going on. So it may mean that the condition of your victim prevents the extrication itself. So one of the types of carries, the one-person arm carry. For the jocks, this is the best one. They just scoop them up and go. You want to lift around the victim's back and under the knees. Lift the victim by keeping your own back straight and lifting with your legs. Now, who can tell me when this may not be the best lift? A back or a spinal injury. Because their head's just going to be flopping everywhere and their back's all kinked up. We don't want to do that. So, we may want to think about a different type of move.
Another thing to think of is that person going to be too heavy for you to pick up? Can you pick that person up where you don't hurt yourself?
And that's where you know your limitations. Know your limitations. The pack strap carrier. Again, this may not be the best one for somebody who is suffering from a head or a spine injury. And if you have the ability to do this, it takes a lot of the weight, the load of dead weight especially, because to pick a person up in here right now isn't a difficult task, but if they're unconscious and they are dead weight, they get heavier. And so that may be the best way to carry somebody, because you're putting a lot of that, you're dispersing a lot of that weight by carrying them that way. The 2-person carry, this is probably one of the most safest and effective. If the person say they've got injuries, but you don't suspect head trauma, you don't suspect spinal injury, this is the easiest way. Grab a hold of the clothing right there, up here. You notice he's got him up under the arms, and he's got a hold of his wrist. They really don't show you that, but he's got a hold of his wrist. Yep, just like he's doing right back there. And you want to make that lock. That way, whenever you lift up, they're just kind of riding in the seat of your arms.
Hey, can I?
Yeah.
Actually, you said to grab the clothing. It's actually safer if you grab the inside of the leg.
Well, they've got him grabbing the
The
shorts.
clothing is, actually, if you look underneath here, his hands placed
Now
up.
there he is, yeah. But over there,
Now,
he's,
if you get underneath that leg, you're gonna get more of a stable grip than grabbing the clothing. Because what if the clothing is like ripped, torn, burnt, something's wrong with the clothing and it slides off. You want to actually grab the inside of that knee.
Seems like it'd be better for him, the one holding his leg, to be turned around the other way so he's walking straight out instead of backwards.
and you can. Whatever helps facilitate it and making it easier for you.
That's something you just got to kind of determine how far you've got to carry them, where you're carrying them to, just things to think about.
The chair carry, depending on what kind of chair you're using. I mean, I would think about it like one of these. I wouldn't lift you in one of those chairs. That would scare me. Now, one of these chairs over here, that's got a little bit more meat and potatoes to it. It's a little bit more sturdy. I would lift somebody in that. It really does take a lot of the weight off. We'll practice a little bit of this whenever we do some practicals. You'll be surprised how much you can lift with somebody seated in a chair. The blanket carry, in an emergency for someone who may be suffering from a head head trauma or a spinal injury, this is effective. It's not the best, but you can get by with it. In an emergency, if you had to perform an emergency move with these, you've got to get them out of there because bad things will fix and happen to everybody. Use a blanket carry. We'll talk about log rolling. How many have ever seen this done? Okay. Remember how we talked about the other day, whenever you're going to immobilize somebody that has a head or spine injury, that one person's going to take the head and hold that spine in line? That person at the head is in command. They're in charge. Whoever's got the head is the one who's going to be calling the shots. So when everybody's down there and you get ready to log roll somebody, they're going to say, ready, on 3. 1, 2, 3. And the people on that side are going to roll that person to them. Reason being for that is this is where you are going to put that blanket underneath them if they have that head or spine injury. If the EMS personnel have arrived and they've got a long spine board, or you're having to put them on a door, this is how you're going to do it. You're going to log roll them, slide whatever needs to be underneath them right under there as they're rolled up on their side, and then the person at the head is going to say, okay, ready, back down, 1, 2, 3, and they're going to bring them back down, and then you can just lightly adjust them and they're on that fixed board. The blanket drag, this is emergency move whenever this person may be pretty large and you are not. And all you can do is drag them as best you can. There's another way of doing this. Firefighters have a rope about that big around, about yay long. They put it under the arms and around the back. They don't have to carry a big blanket. They just have a rope. And it's got a knot. And they just run it through the arms, over the head, and up under. And then they can use that rope and drag somebody out if they need to. So that's something to think about. Small piece of rope about that long will go good in your back. So, to sum it up, things you should know: how to decide whether or not to attempt a rescue. Think about those contributing factors to your safety, knowing whenever you can undertake this and when you can't. The objectives of interior and exterior search and rescue. How to perform a search and a rescue size up, that 9-step process. Building markings. When you enter the building, what do you do first? One slash,
Date and time entered.
the date and time entered, and your CERT ID. When you come out,
What was searched. What was found.
very good.
I know.
Rescue functions. How to remove debris, cribbing, leveraging, and then how to extricate somebody using the lifts. And normally, again, what we would do is we would take that time, we would break up into groups and we would demonstrate the lifts. We're going to do that during the practicals day, wipe all that out at once. And so we'll just kind of refresh your memory about some of those things, okay? Anybody have any questions?